Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this episode of School Business Tech. We took a little bit of a couple of weeks break, but we're back on form, and I'm really happy to have here today Stephen Bilboe from WCBS, sorry, I should say. We're going to be talking about the future of tech in independent schools. As we know, all schools have needed to evolve their use of technology during this pandemic, and the independent and international school sector has been no exception to this. I'm going to be chatting to Stephen today about his experience and the experience at WCBS to date. We'll be exploring some of the pressures on independent and international schools from their fee-paying parents and what their response has been in these schools. Has technology actually helped them out of this high pressure situation? And is it now here to stay? And what does that future actually look like? So why have I got Stephen here to talk today? Well, Stephen has over 10 years experience within finance, education and technology. He started his career at CRB Cunningham's before joining Squids to lead their UK education business. Now, Stephen is the Sales and Marketing Director of WCBS, who are the leading provider of MIS finance and admission systems to the independent and international schools market. And over the last few years, they've been heavily investing in technology, which resulted in their launch of Hub MIS last October. Hi, Stephen. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me on.
Good, and thank you very much for taking the time out, because I know you're super busy at the moment, and I'm sure with last night's announcement, everything in the education, kind of both local and international, is just all going crazy. But if we could cut straight to the questions, and that would be a great start. So can you tell me, what has been the impact of coronavirus on the independent and international schools market?
Yeah, I mean, it's hit it hard, as it's hit just about every aspect of education or industry in general. But just looking at the independent schools in the UK, I think the figures, circa 30 independent schools have closed their doors permanently as a direct result of COVID-19. Not only that, but a lot of the schools have had to give discounts on their fees. So, anywhere between sort of 25% off the day school rate, some less, some a little bit more. And clearly things like boarding and trips, they haven't been able to charge for any of those extras. So their income has been hit pretty hard as well.
So 30 schools, independent schools, no more. That's it. Gone. Right. Straight out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these typically are your smaller schools that maybe have been struggling with admissions for a while, possibly haven't been able to compete in their, or at least widen their catchment net. So if you think about the local independent school, lots of parents want to send their child to the independent school if they can. Everyone wants the best for their child. However, fees have been rising typically by circa 3-4% over the last decade. For a lot of people, that's just put it out of reach. So the schools that have really done well have been able to broaden their catchment net, attract students from further afield, maybe even internationally. But those that haven't been able to do that have seen a declining picture of pupil numbers. Clearly, pupils leads to revenue, which has made it pretty unsustainable for them over time. And COVID has just been that straw that's broken the camel's back.
Right.
So I mean, that's the first thing. I mean, you've obviously got that reduction in income. And then in terms of how they've been impacted there afterwards, I think what you really saw was a laser-like focus on delivering value to parents and education to students. When you're being charged potentially up to, 20, £30,000 a year for school fees, and you're not on site, you've got your child at home, it's a pretty hard ask to say, can you still send that sort of money to me when the child sat at home in their bedroom or in the lounge and not on the school campus doing all the activities they normally would. So we saw an absolute laser-like focus on value to parents and education to students. And I think all schools have adapted remarkably well to remote learning, although certainly from my experience looking at the independent schools and international schools in particular, because of that stick of the fees coming in, they just did it so quickly. The shift to online learning was brilliant, doing live lessons pretty much right from the off, back in sort of the spring last year. So, I mean, that's been one of the big changes, but clearly everybody's done it. I just think they've done it really, really well. I think what we've also then seen is because of the reduction in fee income, they've all known that they maybe need to do a little bit more on admissions and focus on getting those pupils through the door and, advertising their school to absolutely the best of their ability. But now COVID has forced them to do it because they can't just run those open days like they previously would. They can't rely on that beautiful telephone manner or people just walking through the school gate. They've had to get out there and compete and make sure they're attractive to those parents, to make sure those numbers are coming through.
Can you tell me, like, how has technology facilitated that? Because you're right, there isn't that ability for you as a parent to be passing the school gate or to pick up the phone potentially because there is no one on site. What have they done differently to? I know you mentioned online learning and admissions, but how has technology facilitated that? What has technology done to enable those changes?
Yeah, so I mean, I think if we look at the online learning in the first instance, just like you've seen in most schools, if you didn't have a digital learning offering, they've pretty much all got one now that they're using. The big shift that we've seen is Office 365 and Microsoft Teams in particular. Lots of schools using that to deliver their lessons, alongside your likes of your Fireflies and Frogs, etc., as your more traditional learning platforms. But in terms of the admissions, there's been a lot more focus on what you might call an admissions CRM. So rather than just having a lovely telephone manner, picking up the phone and speaking to somebody in the admissions office and that being logged on a spreadsheet, being far more analytical and sophisticated in their approach, almost thinking of it like you would in a business from a sales funnel. How do I generate those inquiries? How many of those inquiries come through to applications? How many applications come through to enrolled students? And that's looking at things like automated email systems and communication systems through an admissions CRM. So that's been one certainly where we've seen a lot of interest. In terms of technology in the open days and not getting parents through the gates, a lot of virtual tours, a huge amount of that. And I think it'll be interesting to see where that goes in the future, whether there'll be some sort of augmented reality that maybe comes into it a bit more than what we're seeing at the moment. But, a big almost lick of paint on the school website, focus on revenue generating systems like admission systems have been really quite key for that. And any tool that can help them facilitate a digital learning experience in the best possible way that justifies that fee income has been high on their priority list.
Right. So I guess what I'm hearing is, I'm going to be next year, VR headset, I'm going to be walking around some manor house in Surrey or something like that. Is that what I'm going to see?
You're probably seeing it at the moment, maybe a little bit. Whether you'll see it next year, whether go a bit more towards the traditional and the personal touch again, which we're probably all craving to get some human interaction. I think it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But certainly at the moment, you'll see if you go onto a lot of websites, a lot of virtual tours that you can do and clicking around.
Yeah. So, and it's really interesting because, I suppose you mentioned, as far as school kind of business and operational processes, it really feels like the admissions process is becoming a bit more like a sales and marketing funnel, so you go for the virtual tour, you make the inquiry, it goes through into this kind of sales funnel. And it's a bit of a, we talk, if you're in a business, and to be honest, if you're in a charity or whatever, there is some revision, it might not be called a sales funnel, it might be an admissions funnel, it might be a donor funnel, depending on which sector you're in. But fundamentally, a lot of these workflows, these operations keep a similar process. And I suppose it would be weird if I was going into a business or in my business, somebody was like, oh, I've had an inquiry on the phone, I'm going to write this on a spreadsheet. So do you think the reporting piece is becoming a bit more, relevant and being enabled based on this technology that they're taking on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two things that you sort of hit the nail on the head there. One is maybe they haven't been as commercially minded as they are needing to be now, because they are typically the local independent school. They've had a steady flow from maybe the local catchment area or wider afield through organic growth. But because competition is high, fees have been rising steadily for a period of time, and wage growth inflation hasn't necessarily kept pace. They have had to take more of a commercial view, and that sales funnel or admissions funnel, as you say, is absolutely critical now. That then feeds through into data. So board of governors, headmasters, director of admissions, they're all interested in what their enrollment is going to look like next year. It's absolutely critical if they're going to survive and thrive going forward, they need to know what their numbers are. And it's not just the revenue that they get from having those students in this year, it's the revenue they get over 5 years, and then also the lifetime value. So one of the things that we've seen from COVID is a lot of hardship funds being raised. So where parents may have struggled with their income over this very challenging time, some schools that have strong alumni, they've been able to tap them up to raise hardship funds that can support some of the other families trying to maybe meet the needs of the fees over this time whilst their income has been hit. And that data is absolutely critical to it, not just for now, but for those future years as well.
Right. And that's really insightful, actually, Stephen. I think, there'll be some schools that'll be watching this that obviously aren't independent schools. There'll be accountability or still kind of maintained. do you see this kind of admissions process as this declining birth rate? You know, I know it's very gradual, but do you see this admissions process and this admissions funnel being a thing that might extend further than independence? I know the numbers are very different with independent to academies and maintained, but I suppose the principle still applies.
I think there definitely is some crossover. And certainly maybe when you get more towards sixth form, for instance, you'll see the admissions process really kick in the maintained sector. Maybe less so, up until sixth form, but certainly from sixth form more relevant. But for independent schools, it's absolutely critical.
Okay, that's great. Final question from me, which I ask everybody who comes on the show, but what are your predictions for kind of technology and kind of around school business operations over the next kind of 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think we're in for an interesting time ahead. I mean, we've seen a lot of consolidation in the market over the last year or two, with a lot of acquisitions taking place. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens from that, whether we get more of a one-stop shop and a consolidation of offerings, which ultimately could lead to less choice and ultimately worse outcomes. But I hope that's not the case. Certainly from my side, our view is that we want to remain agnostic and allow schools to choose best of breed where necessary, but through a tightly integrated solution. But in terms of where that's going to go, I think data and insight is going to be key. So, having products that are in the cloud, typically cloud native, that you can pull, as we call it, insights. So you can take some interesting learnings of school A happening over here. I mean, it might be in China, it might be in the Middle East. And is that going to have an insight or a valuable insight to what's happening in a school in Surrey, for instance? Is there some learnings that we could take from there and apply it to allow some proactive intervention? So I think that's one area. And then the other area is digital schools. So, we've all been forced into home learning at the moment. I, for one, would be very glad when my child is back at school full time and not at home.
Join the club, yeah.
But I don't know whether you've seen Harrow School Online have launched a sixth form online only. So a slightly reduced rate to what it would be if you were on site, but it's quite an interesting method for independent schools that have been looking to open up sister schools, in the Middle East, in China and other parts of Asia, for instance, typically, which is scalable in many instances. But you need campuses, you need buildings, you need teachers. It's very costly. But the idea of an online only education, maybe for sixth formers, where you can still get all the brand and the benefits of the alumni of going to that independent school, but maybe at a fraction of the price, and take it from your home in Dubai or your home in India or wherever else you may be, might be quite attractive. And I think, Harrow have set the pace there. It wouldn't surprise me if you see quite a few other schools follow.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I think you're right. We have to remember this has happened on a global scale. This isn't just, England or the United Kingdom. Internationally, everyone's had the same problems, and it'll be really interesting to see that. I mean, I know you mentioned it to me before this, and I checked it out, but it looks like a really strong offering. If you're in the middle of somewhere in Malaysia or China or India or Dubai or wherever, and you actually want a British education, which is arguably one of the, if not the best in the world. Could you do it virtually, and could you access it that way? And I think it's really interesting that they've taken the lead on that and seen a gap and said, right, actually, this won't be a strange thing after COVID to ask parents to be involved in, or that they might consider.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting space. And you may also get some parents that are reluctant to send their child abroad. I think it's going to be few and far between. But some of them have been caught out. They haven't seen their children for many months because of lockdowns that have happened. We've been speaking to schools, and children have been there over Christmas, for instance, haven't been able to get home because of the lockdown. Would they want to do that again going forward? So maybe an online option is more appropriate, or maybe they decide to send them to the local international school instead. So I think watch this space and see what people's views are.
Very good. Stephen, thank you so much for your insight today. Really appreciate, love that kind of independent and international perspective that you bring. And listen, all the best with all the work that you're doing at WCBS. I know you're doing a fantastic job and some great systems with everything. So really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. It's been a pleasure.
All right, take care.
Cheers.